My name is Mike Browne, pronouns he, him, and I'm the Community Engagement Manager for Hilltop Educator Institute, the professional development and community outreach arm of Hilltop Children's Center, a Reggio-inspired preschool on the traditional lands of the Duwamish tribe, the first people of what is now known by colonizers as Seattle, Washington. As a professional development institute focused on anti-racism, equity, and social justice, we have to constantly examine ourselves, our programs, and actively eliminate barriers to learning so we can all benefit from the knowledge and rich experiences of others. Over the course of the years, we've listened, we've reflected, and now we're responding to the calls of our friends in Tennessee, Indiana, DC, New Mexico, Canada, and more to make our offerings more accessible. So, welcome to our newest segment called Community Voices. Now, despite being short in minutes, these segments pack a powerful punch. They're rich in knowledge from leaders within the field, and best of all, they're free. So grab a pen, share with a friend, and as Hilltop Core Values says, let's learn in relationship with each other.
I just wanted to kick off and just give you a little bit of our history of Hilltop and where we've started and kind of where we're going in our future. We're super excited to announce that we are about to celebrate our 50th anniversary in early 2021. No matter what has gone on in our world and in our country, in our state, we're excited that we're making it to our golden anniversary. And just thinking about the years that have been before us. If you don't know, we actually started in 1971 in the basement of a church on top of Queen Anne Hill, and it was this grassroots organization that was started by parents for parents. And over the last 49 years, we've evolved with the evolution of childcare. We started off as a school-age program, again, for those families who needed care up in the Queen Anne neighborhood. And since then have become a leading organization in our community for early childhood education, which we're very proud of. In September 2007, we were able to relocate to our current location at 4 Nickerson off of the canal between Ballard and Fremont in the Seattle neighborhood, where we have a beautiful center that is right on, backed up against the water, and the kids get to have that very natural feel of this space in a city, which is incredible. I'm so excited that over the last 50 years, we kind of have taken a lot of research to see what is the best when it comes to child development and helping children really foster and grow to be independent community members. And our curriculum has also transformed over the last 50 years. We've gone through different evolutions of using high scope and approaches of Montessori to folk tale and your traditional seasonal themes that a lot of providers have used. And eventually we landed on this very value-aligned vision of the Reggio Emilia approach. And we have put a lot of efforts into implementing those theories into our classrooms, into the way that we communicate with one another as educators and adults, and have really put that emphasis on the whole child. Oh, sorry, there's a phone behind me. In 2002, we actually were able to develop our Educators Institute, and that has really evolved to help us connect our community, not only here in Seattle in those other centers that we use, but also across the state and across the country, which we're extremely proud of. The Institute has allowed for our educators to have the opportunity to enhance their ways of advocacy, facilitating. Our educators have had the chance to be published in books and in videos, and we started a Napcast in April of this year, where 2 male educators of color are getting the opportunity to share their experience in being a predominantly white female industry, and the challenges that come with really having people feel safe with males being in this field of early childhood education, working with children, and just the value add for a lot of our families who are missing that influence of a strong male person in their lives for children. So we're really extremely proud of that experience that Mike and others have created in that NAPcast. I hope that when you're going through the tour today and talking to other members of our team, that you get a chance to really dive into the work that we're doing here in Hilltop. I encourage you to think about ways that we could improve as an organization, challenge us to really dive into our pedagogy, ask lots of questions, use the chat room today to just keep the conversation going. We'll have time for questions and answers later, but really this is a chance for us to come together as a community of like-minded thinkers when it comes to what is the value of early childhood education. And I'm really excited to have your feedback and also to be able to share the great work that we're doing here. I think we're all living in a time that's really unknown, you know, as we're in COVID. And so we also want to encourage you to think about ways that we're evolving when it comes to the world about early childhood education in the middle of a pandemic, and also ideas of what you're doing across, you know, for wherever you're sitting and whatever room you're in, and how we can look at those things. Use the chat room to give us shout outs or to give kudos, but really it's a time for reflection for all of us. And so thank you again for being here. I'm really excited, and I'm going to hand you off to my colleague and someone who I have admired for years, Sarah Felsner. She's going to go ahead and give you a tour of the space, and we'll kind of go from there. And I'll look forward to the question and answer session. Thanks all for being here.
Thank you, Darlene. Hi, I'm Sarah Felstiner. I'm one of the mentor educators here at Hilltop Children's Center. In my 25th year here, I got to serve as an educator and administrator, and also a Hilltop parent. And I'm mentioning that because I'm only going to be able to take you through a couple of our rooms today. We're walking through classrooms that are outside on our playground right now, so we can tour through, but they happen to be the 2 classrooms that my son was in when he went to Hilltop, so I have special personal attachment to these classrooms as well. So we're right now standing in the art studio of one of our classrooms for younger children. The kids in this space are usually about 2 to 2.5 years old in our raindrop classroom. And I mentioned our art studio, so this is a small studio space attached to the classroom itself. And this is a space that gets used really flexibly each day. Educators can come in with small groups of children. Like, you got to show folks the paint on the wall here. This is a working studio space. There's literally paint splattered on the walls, and that's awesome. This is a space where real art happens, and the children make a mess here, and that is very much what it is designed for. And so while this classroom has 10 children each day, small groups of 3 or 4 or 5 children can come into this space with an educator to do visual artwork or have meetings. Then we're going to walk into their classroom space. So again, this is would be a group of up to 10 2 to 2.5-year-olds doing our typical session. And some things to notice about this space. First, I like to lovingly and jokingly point out our decorating style, which I call intentional funk. The stuff here is meant to feel home-like, is meant to have some character, is really meant to be a place that feels like a home away from home for children. Typically, this would also be a place that families are hanging out and welcome as well. Of course, during our COVID response session, we're not having families in the building. You might typically see a lot more written documentation for families on our walls, and of course we're sharing that in other ways right now, but we just wanted to kind of walk you through the space and give you a flavor of how educators might prepare the space for children, offering little what we call invitations or provocations, just little areas where kids might find something to intrigue them.
Hey, Mike, You're covering we can't hear you, Sarah. You're covering the microphone or something.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all right. I just want to make sure we caught you before you went too far. And Mike, can you go just a little slower with your camera movements?
Okay. Did you get to hear any of my introduction to the art studio?
We got all that. It was just the last couple 30 seconds maybe the microphone got covered.
Thank you so much for letting us know. I was just noting how the educators might prepare the space in the morning with what we call invitations, provocations, things that might draw kids' interest as they come in. And then we really want the children to have the flexibility to spend as much time at each of those activities as they feel drawn to. So some kids might find something that really intrigues them and spend 90 minutes or 2 hours engaged in that, and other children, like my son, when he was here, might bounce from activity to activity and really check out everything in the space. Anything else we need to show in here? One other thing I wanted to point out, on the walls of each classroom, somewhere you'll see writing that educators have done, and these are the values or the questions that each particular team of teachers at Hilltop has chosen for their year, their own research, their own thinking, because of their quest for lifelong learning, just the things that they want to focus on as they're working with children and families and each other. So we're going to walk out into our main hallway and then to one of the classrooms for 3, 4, and 5-year-old children. Hi, good morning. Good morning. So we're coming past our library here. This is would be a resource. Good morning. Resource. So this is a shared library for the whole school that all the educators would have access to and kids as well. And we're going to take a peek also into our educator workroom to give you a sense of where and how we store all of these.
It sounds like Mike's got that covered. Yes.
So this is a workroom where educators have time when they're out of the classroom to do planning and communications, but also what we call our materials library of shared resources that get pulled into all the classrooms in response to questions, interests, things that are coming up in children's play. And we're going to walk past our welcoming area. This is where, again, during our typical care sessions, families would come in, feel welcome, hang out. We also have a loose parts library of found materials from which beautiful work like this might get created. And then I'll walk you down towards one of the classrooms for older children. So down this hallway, all of these classrooms serve groups of children who are 3, 4, and 5 years old. And this is in what we call family style or mixed age grouping that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, where the 3, 4, and 5-year-olds are all together in a classroom group, and we'd like to have that mixed age grouping for this age range in particular. So this gives you a little bit of a sense of what a classroom for the older children might look like, again with provocations set up for kids to come and engage with. This group is also outside on our playground right now. And as I mentioned, each classroom has a dedicated art studio space. Studio as well, a place where small groups of children could come in and do more focused work with an educator. And these spaces get used really flexibly each day. Some days it might be an open-ended activity like tissue paper and starch that any kid could come in and take a turn to do. Other days there might be a very purposeful meeting of a small group of kids who are doing next steps of some investigation that they're in the midst of together. So let's take a look into their classroom space. And again, you can just see how the educators have kind of prepared the space, and similar to what we saw in the other classroom, it looks like for this group of educators, their questions or their areas of focus this year are unity, trust, and adaptability. They seem like really good things to focus on during this particular time. And so those are just notions that these educators are keeping in mind and paying attention to as they record stories of children's work and their documentation. Let's take a little peek at the saving shelf here. You can see that children have been working on some things that they maybe got partway through but want to come back to. And that's another way that we try and extend that sense of time through the day so that kids don't have their work interrupted, but rather can work on it for long periods of time or come back to it later. In these classrooms of 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, during our typical care sessions, we might have as many as 15 children in the group. Like, anything else I should be sure to say as we're walking around?
Just the different environments, how it looks like 3 different spaces.
Yeah, I mean, you can see that while we have sort of a wide open space, I would say that without breaking the space up into designated zones, the educators do try and draw attention to different areas or create different spaces for kids just in how they offer the materials. And this gives us a lot of flexibility to be responsive to things that children are playing about. So the horses that Mike just showed you might be put out today specifically because of a conversation that children were having about horses at our morning meeting yesterday, or a story that was read about horses, and then the educators can use the way they set up the environment to respond to these questions and interests of the kids. One other thing that I'll just point out as Mike walks around is you'll see family photos everywhere on the bookshelves and windowsills and coffee tables, and this would be happening COVID response session or not. We really want families to be visible in our classroom and to be welcome in our classrooms. And it's particularly critical for us now when families aren't coming into the building to really be sharing our stories out and bringing their stories back in. One of the ways that we really make sure families have a window into what's happening is that every child has their own journal where stories of their work are recorded. Of course, we're also emailing and sharing these stories in other ways, but we keep these journals here so that children can pull them out and look through and revisit the stories of their play. So we're going to head into some chance to see what questions have come up for you all, and I will step into another room so I can chat with you.
Okay, hi everyone. So I see a couple of things on our chat room. Let's see what we got. Looks like Darline already got it started, so thank you on that one. So we're gonna ask anyone to just kind of pop on their cameras and unmute themselves if you have any questions on what you saw, any things on how we're doing childcare during COVID. Really, this is your chance to ask away. And don't be shy. There's always that lag time. Someone's like, oh, should I go first?
Mike, this is Karen. Hi, good morning.
Yes.
My question has to do with the adult-child ratio. Are you serving at 50% like the Navy is right now with only mission essential children, or are all your children considered because of what the parents are doing in the workplace, or what have you, mission essential, so that we can keep the individual teacher with the individual pod, and we're not having teachers go between, between different pods to minimize the COVID risk?
Yeah, I think that would be an excellent answer for my executive director, Darline, to answer. So Darline?
Yeah, thank you for that. We started off back in April at, only serving essential families, so families who are working in the medical profession. We did that for the first 2 months as COVID started. And then eventually in June, we transitioned to welcoming all of our families back who needed care. We are running at a much smaller ratio than our normal ratio. So in our classrooms, we're averaging in our toddler world, it's a 3-to-1 now, and then in our preschool world, it's a 6-to-1, and then as well as our school age. So none of our classrooms are at our normal capacity, and then each of our classrooms are set up in bubbles. So the same 2 educators stay within that bubble the whole time, and we actually reduced our hours of operation. So each classroom has a set of hours that they're open, and they're equivalent to the teacher's hours of 8 hours. And then that way it's the same educator in the same space with the same group of children all day, rather than pre-COVID, we had teachers who would come in and open and close, and we would often need to combine classrooms at the end of the day or the beginning of the day for staffing reasons, and we're not doing that right now. So each of our classroom has a assigned pickup and drop-off window that's within that 8-hour day, so that teacher, that educator can stay with that same group of children. And then we do have a group of support educators or substitute teachers who can go into classrooms to cover an educator who's out for the day, but then that substitute teacher cannot go into another classroom bubble for 72 hours. So we have it stationed off very specifically so that we're not doing cross-contamination. And the last piece I would just add is that we did this year by quarters. So their parents signed up for a quarter session with us, and then our program shuts down at the end of the quarter to do a deep clean of our building, and then we start a second session quarter where families can continue to come and use our services, but we needed that break in between. So we really stationed it off that way. And I have to say that I'm extremely proud that we've been open since the very beginning of COVID, and we haven't had any cases in our building, and our actual number of common colds has dropped down dramatically than what we normally would see in our health patterns, just because we're sanitizing so much and we are preserving everybody in this unique way.
Okay, thank you very much.
Of course.
Tiffany, yes. Did you raise your hand?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I like that you guys have both the natural light as well as little lamps and things in the classroom, and wondering if you have any challenges with having lamps with cords and plugs and things like that, or they're just used to it, so there haven't been any.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I'm going to give that question off to Sarah Felstiner, who you just saw. Sarah?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we really are trying to be mindful of safety, of course, and how we're routing our cords and making sure lamps are secured to the wall so they don't fall over and stuff like that. So that's the first piece, of course. And then the second piece is that when we do, work with a licensor who wants to check out our environment, and we really use their resource to think through things like that and take their guidance if there's something that we could do more safely. And often it's also an opportunity for us to explain the why behind and why we've set up lighting in a certain way or shelves in a certain way, so that they can kind of partner with us on that.
Thank you. So I got a question. How did children move from classroom to classroom before COVID? Does each class assign time for each room? And I think that's a wonderful question that I'm going to ask one of our mentor educators, and she didn't know she was going to be speaking today, Emily, to facilitate that question. So once again, it's pre-COVID. How did children move from classroom to classroom? Does each class assign time for each room?
There's not necessarily an assigned time. I would say it's based on need and desire overall. Sometimes a kid just needs a break from the classroom, so we'll say, hey, do you want to go visit over here? Sometimes kids want to visit their friends that they used to be in a class with, but now they're not, and we try to support those relationships. And sometimes it's a sibling connection, and we want to support those sibling connections as well. So kids will want to visit, or we'll say, hey, do you want to go visit? Does that answer the question?
Works for me. Okay, what other questions or thoughts? What did you see during the tour, besides me covering the mic several times, that sparked interest for you? But before we get into that, it looks like we have a question. Could you speak to your curriculum, specifically your anti-bias curriculum? So for that, I'm going to shoot that over. Well, it's going to be an open one, but I'm going to have Sarah start, and then I'm going to ask the rest of my team to chime in when appropriate.
Sure, I'll lead it off just to say that the anti-bias education is an ongoing topic of study for us as educators, something really we put most of our focus on in our own professional development, and something we're committed to for our children, really wanting them to have what they need to become competent citizens in a diverse world. And that looks like bringing those topics, bringing those questions, bringing those stories into the classroom, whether it comes from the children, from families, or from provocations that we offer as educators.
Thank you. And does Emily or Darlene, would you like anything to chime in on that?
Yeah, I would also just add to that, that it's also just encouraging children to feel safe enough to ask questions, whether it's asking an educator why their color of their skin is darker than theirs, or, you know, there's a lot of conversations happening right now because of the political space that we're in, where we're just having those dialogues with children about Black Lives Matters. We're talking a lot right now about the political climate, and it's allowing that to be a safe space, and also being very honest with children and being transparent. So lots of partnerships with families to make sure that they understand that we're having those deep conversations and that we're not going to shy away from those tough moments.
And I would add too that we work really hard to try and include family identity and culture into our classrooms as much as possible, so that children are feeling welcome. And I would say, just as with every organization, this is an area that we're continuing to learn and grow in.
Perfect. I'm going to stay right with you, Emily, because you have a very unique and cool role as a mentor teacher. So can you just describe what that is for folks who might not know? And then how does that play into supporting educators in developing the necessary tools they need to support the anti-bias curriculum in the classroom?
Yeah, I would say that my role overall is to support educators in all aspects of their work. So I'm supporting their work with parents, their work with kids, their work with each other, their work within the organization. And that looks a lot of different ways. And with anti-bias work in particular, I feel like that's a lens I'm trying to hold on to regularly, so that in team meetings or in the classroom, if I hear something or see something, or if I'm not hearing or seeing something, I can bring those things up.
Thank you. I also see that we have another one of my colleagues on this, Alfonso. So Alfonso, can you speak to just about how are you supporting families?
Yeah, my name is Alfonso, and I'm one of the senior managers here at Hilltop, specifically for family engagement and research.
You're a little muted, muffled. Do you mind pulling
Is that a little better?
Opportunity?
Is that a little better?
Yeah, there you go.
I was saying I am one of the senior managers here at Hilltop, specifically around family engagement and support. So what I try to do is just try to kind of keep my ear to the ground and try to find out what the community, what our students and what our families need, and just try to kind of venture out and use my connections and the network that I've built during my time at Seattle Public Schools and different entities to kind of help serve those families and just make sure I can at least provide them the resources to help them with anything that they might need support in.
Thank you. So we have another question on post-COVID, how are art materials accessed for children? Are children assigned their own art materials? Do you do that? So I'm gonna open that up to both Emily and Sarah.
Yeah, I think right now we have different classrooms doing different things. They're doing what works for them. Some classrooms do have like a can for each kid that has all of their own markers and colored pencils and dry erase markers and stuff like that, so that, you know, then they don't necessarily need to sanitize it. And then other classrooms are just paying attention to what materials kids are using and sanitizing them at the end of the day or throughout the day.
This is Darline. Sorry, Mike. You said not. You didn't say my name, but I'm jumping in anyways. I think the other thing that we're trying to do, what is really important to us, even in the midst of COVID, is having children feel like this is a safe place for them to be, and that things have not changed for them. We want it to be the stability in their lives amongst everything else that is changing in the world. So for us, in our classrooms, because we're in this very protected bubble situation, we're just allowing them to be themselves within their own space. We try to social distance as much as we can, but we also don't want children to not be able to feel connected. So we are allowing things to be shared within that same space. We're allowing children to still get as much as we can. We try to limit the amount of physical connection that's happening, but if a child is sad and needs a hug, as educators, we're not going to shy away from that. And then at the end of the day, we sanitize the room, and we actually have a custodial crew that is coming in and doing extra cleaning so that we can make sure that each of our spaces are completely sanitized. But this is a place for children where they need that continuity, and that was important to us. So all of our materials are available to all children that are in that classroom space, and we're just preserving those bubbles.
Perfect. So we have about questions. We have time for 2 more questions before we go to our second part of our tour. So I'm gonna ask Emily and Alfonso to get into place. But the first question that I have is from Meredith. So Meredith, go ahead, unmute yourself. And what is your question?
Okay, I kind of had 2. I was wondering if you support any families that wanted their child like for virtual support, or if you only have in-person classes. And then also, since families aren't, parents or adult figures aren't allowed inside, if you do any additional like parent engagement or support.
Absolutely. I'm going to break up your first question. I'm going to give Darline the first crack at that to talk about eCamp over the summer. And then I'm going to ask you to hold on, Meredith, for the second part, because in about 5 minutes, I think we'll answer that question in our next part of the tour. So Darline? And you're muted.
Of course I am. Thanks for asking. We did start our year off when COVID started, offering an online or e-learning option for families, and we realized that it was really challenging for the children. It started off strong in April, May, June, and then by the time July rolled around, we were noticing that children were not as involved in that online piece. And so we transitioned to fully in-person sessions, and that right now we don't have the teacher or the educator ability to offer both. However, what we did do, because school has started, we transitioned to supporting the online learning for school children who are in elementary school. And I think we're about to jump into some of that. So we'll show you how we support the e-learning side for elementary school children, but our preschoolers are all in person.
Thank you. And then for the last question that I have from Karen is, how do you reflect emerging curriculum on a lesson plan? So I'm going to give that question to Sarah, who is
Thanks. Yeah, great question. For us, that looks like folding our intentionality and our planfulness into the storytelling and the documentation that we do regularly of children's play. So when we write up a story of something cool that happened today, we include in that our projection, our best guess of like, based on that activity, here's how I think I'll offer these materials tomorrow, or here's what I think our next steps are. And so that's actually folded into our ongoing documentation, whether that's in our blog that we share with families, or those things that you saw on our walls. And so that's how we're demonstrating that planfulness, that lesson planning, that it really grows day by day and week by week from the actual activities that are going on in the classroom.
All right, thank you for that. So as we said in the beginning, at least I think we said it, we opened up a second location earlier this year, a couple months ago, which is really to support our school age and our remote learning, as well as a new classroom and a new program offering. So I'm going to switch it over and over to Alfonso, who's over at our second location, to speak more about that. Alfonso?
Welcome to our Fremont location. I also serve as a program supervisor here, and I'm going to show you guys our Oak Room. So we're in our Oak Room right now, which is exclusively to serve our kindergarten families. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, and originally it was to emphasize social emotional growth and just really support those students who can use maybe an additional year before kindergarten or before school actually started. And as you can see here, we have a very Socratic style of setting up our classroom. Kind of reminds me of a council of kindergartners, I like to call it. But you can see lots of spacing for social distancing. And then our classroom has since also become a hybrid classroom, which now serves families with remote learning. And we've created a space for our classroom to also serve those students who are specifically doing remote learning for the majority of the day. So we're now in our remote learning area for our students, which is about half of the classroom now. But they have very similar schedules that are maybe not necessarily in front of a screen, but at least still the same components, so our children are still experiencing the same things while they're doing different styles of learning. And I'm going to show you our Maple classroom now, which is our school age program. So right in here is our Maple classroom, which actually has lower ratios to support students with more individual approach to their learning, but it is also to support remote learning. And currently, I believe they're doing something, so we're just going to take a quick peek inside.
Hi.
What are you doing?
We're taking a video.
And that was our Maple classroom.
All right. Thank you, Alfonso. So we're going to open back up with more questions, but as people start to, as Alfonso gets situated again, I'm going to shoot it over to Darline to talk a little bit more about the Oak Room, since that is our newest program here, just on the growth that you've been seeing there.
As far as our kindergarten classroom, Mike?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, so this was a really great area for us to develop because it's a unique year for our children who are entering kindergarten for the first time. It's their first time entering the public school setting in their long educational journey. And so a lot of families were really concerned about them having their first year of school be online. And so we actually have two programs that we offer here at Hilltop. We offer one that were for families who did not want their children to have a kindergarten year. So they were going to repeat one more year of preschool with the intention of starting kindergarten in the fall of 2021. And so that room is set up to support our emergent curriculum, our regimen-inspired approach to our education, but also to have a little bit more intentionality around the academics, because there are some families who may opt to go into first grade and skip that kindergarten year. So we wanted to have a little bit of a bridge in between, and for there not to be a gap in that. So we have one program at our Queen Anne location that offers that. We're not offering the remote learning. It's children are in our program all day, and they're following our emergent curriculum, and we're supporting a little bit of the academics. And then we had a group of parents who wanted their children to go to kindergarten this year and wanted that hybrid model that Alfonso just showed you. So those kids are at our Fremont location, and they spend half of their day or part of their morning online. Someone asked about Seesaw. They're doing those virtual learning classes with Seattle Public Schools, and then they're with us for the social emotional parts of learning, and for also supporting their academics. So our teachers, our educators go back and forth between having them go over to that little corner that you saw, that little nook, and jump on their online courses, and then they come back into our classroom space and are integrated into our other children who are not doing the online pieces. And every classroom and every school within our school district has a different schedule. So putting out that little bump out space allowed for children to have that personalized individual time with one of our educators while they're online, and then being integrated back into the classroom when they're not online. Our space here at Fremont also really supports a lot of physical movement. So we have a place within the building for them to do large motor activities and kind of just get their wiggles out because it is a lot of online learning for them. There's some kids in our kindergarten class and in our older 1st to 5th grade classes that are online half their day. And so we do a lot, we break it up a lot, and we have them log off, go do some just physical movement stuff, and then put them back online so that they're able to focus. So a lot of transitioning that's happening there.
All right, and Alfonso, we have a question for you. And the question is, do you communicate shared learning with families using Seesaw or some other social format? So how are we communicating and sharing the learning that's happening with all of our classrooms with our families?
Yeah, so the majority of our students do use Seesaw, or Clever is another platform. And the way those work is they get updates and assignments, and as things are being finished, families get to see the progress of the student. Our educators here can also see the same progress, and then the schools get to see the same progress. So it's a very holistic approach. We try to be very holistic in that we want everybody to be able to support our students. I really like the saying, it takes a village, because especially now in these times where we can't do a lot of in-person learning, we really have to rely a lot on making sure those relationships are strong, so that and so that we can support our students in these challenging times.
Okay.
And Mike, I just want to add to what Alfonso just said. The other piece about communication that's happening right now is all of our families that are in our school age program have signed a data sharing agreement with Seattle Public Schools and Hilltop. So our Hilltop educators are communicating daily with the Seattle Public Schools educators and the families. So there's lots of communication that's being created to have that sort of village approach that Alfonso was referring to, including our educators sitting in on parent-teacher conferences and then making notes on their homework progress.
Thank you. And a little bit more about the journals, because that's such a very unique thing that we have here. So I'm going to shoot that over to Sarah.
Sure. Yeah, I think you're hearing a lot about the great holistic connection that's happening around our children who are doing remote learning through Seattle Public Schools, and how all those connections are happening. And then I could describe a little bit with our younger children, how we're staying in contact with their families. And yeah, Mike mentioned the journals. You got a little peek at those as we walk through the classrooms, and that's a place where we have always gathered stories of children's learning. Some of them might be stories about an adventure the whole class took to go watch the Fremont Bridge go up and down. Others might be stories of a small group of kids doing, still life paintings of pumpkins, and others might be stories of an individual child and something they were working on, or really struggling to master and then mastering. And so a child's journal would contain all of those that they were involved in, their individual stories, small group stories, and full group stories. And that just becomes these traces of the child's year that then get to live with that child and family. And I still have my son's journals and just treasure them.
Thank you. All right, so what other questions or thoughts that are coming up from the group? I don't have anything in my inbox right now, but we are more than happy just to have anyone unmute themselves and do that. All right, in the meanwhile, while our brave participants think of some good things to say, I would love to hear I would love to hear from Alfonso just on your role a little bit more, and because you're a new role here, so just on how that's going for you. How are you able to use, because you're bilingual, how are you able to connect with the variety of different students and families that we are serving?
Yeah, just kind of, again, trying to keep as connected as possible. We serve families that speak Spanish, so it's helped to kind of, bridge that language barrier and make sure that we can effectively communicate, to make sure that we're getting all the information needed to support their children. And then as well as working with those students who are English as second language learners, and making sure that I can connect with their ELL instructor, their school, make sure that we do have those meetings and conferences like Darline said, and just making sure that we try just to connect as much as possible. Just yesterday, I was over at one of our schools that serves the majority of our students, and I was able to connect on a lot of the school culture things that are expected of them when in-person services return. School rules, things like that are going to give them the necessary skills if and when we return to in-person instruction. Another thing that I like to do as well is just connect with families on a more personal level, just making sure that anything outside of their children, but maybe something where they're experiencing some homelessness, some shelter insecurity, food insecurity, things like that, I can make sure I can use my resources to help give them those resources. We go out to Seattle Public Schools meal site. A lot of those grocery bags that go home to parents every weekend, as well as lunch for our students.
Thank you, Alfonso. So for the history, for like about the last 50 years, we've traditionally served kind of one subset of children, and one subset of families, so predominantly white and predominantly high income. And what we've really been doing since the hiring of Darline, is really transforming our culture, transforming the way that we enroll, the way that we partner, the way that we engage the community. And we're slowly transitioning to diversifying, not numerically, the children and families we serve, as well as the staff employed, but a part of that work is changing the culture of an organization, right? So when you've done something for so long, and it has worked for a specific population, it's hard to let that go. So I actually want to throw this question over to Darline, just on what are some of the challenges, the strengths, the opportunities this process has been for you and for the organization as we transitioned, and breaking down the walls of our organization and transitioning to serve more historically marginalized communities? And I'm going to stop you already, Darline, because you are muted. There you go.
Yeah, got it. I'm good. Wow. Brave, tough question, Mike. And thank you for asking it, because I think that we have prided ourselves as an organization who has been leading in the field of early childhood education. And, when we developed the Institute, and the work that we have been doing for the last 50 years has really been to reduce the disparities of quality in ECE. And so when I started here, just a little over a year ago, the one thing that I kept thinking about was, how do we provide an opportunity for every child to have this experience of Hilltop? What the things that I studied when I was in school and learned about Hilltop, the things that I taught when I was teaching in child development, things that people come to us all the time when it comes to this incredible place, which is Hilltop. And you're right in the sense that it has been an opportunity for people who could afford it, and people who have had the ability to have the resources to come here for a really long time to have. And the amount of work that we have put in as an organization around our pedagogy and around really embracing children as having a voice and children being centralized in all of our work was something that I believe, and that we all believe, that every child deserves. For many years, our organization has not participated in some of the systems, like in our state of Washington, Early Achievers, which is our quality rating system, or accepting, DSHS or city subsidies for children, because there wasn't a need. Our program is always full. We have a wait list that are years out for people to get in. And so the way that our enrollment was working for a really long time was based on continuing families, alumni families, and then families who were connected by alumni. And so there was very little opportunity for families who did not meet those categories to get into our system or to get into our program. And so when I started here, the first thing that we were thinking about is how do we change our enrollment process so that every family can have the opportunity to come, and it's not based on who you know or how you're connected to the organization. So we've been working on our systems of enrollment to be more of need-based, and also we reserve spaces in our program for children who may need financial support in that way. We are in the process right now of becoming an Early Achievers program, and are starting to think about how we can start to become a DSHS program or accept children who are on subsidies. Since I've started, we've now accept children who are on city subsidies, and we're just trying to really increase that awareness. The introduction of Alfonso's position as a family support resource was developed because we wanted to put ourselves out there as saying, you can have access to our program, and you have the ability to be here regardless of your ability to pay. And I am proud that we now are serving children who come to us and they don't pay anything at all, that we're subsidizing all of that 100% through Hilltop. And it's come a long way. And I'm really thrilled that we're getting there, but it is a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of time to kind of transition to that mindset of every child, regardless of means of ability to pay, can be in our program. And we're breaking down those barriers every single day. We're also diversifying the educators that we have in our building so that they are starting to reflect the children that are in our space. So, we are welcoming educators who speak different languages, who are from several different countries. We're looking at education in that way. So just because you don't have a higher ed degree in the field of education or early childhood education from the United States doesn't mean that you don't have the ability to work here. So we're honoring the experiences of our educators, and also that every person's individual story and journey is a way for children to learn. And we're embracing all of that with all the amazing things that we do around our pedagogy and really, again, centralizing children. And it's a long road. We have a long way to go, but I'm excited that we're making strides every single day.
Thank you. Let's go to Emily with this next question from Chelsea. Do you have a calm down or safe space in each of the rooms, or place just in general for children to go for de-escalation? So Emily or Alfonso, feel free to chime in there.
Yeah, I'll start, and then Alfonso can add in if he wants to. I wouldn't say we have a specific dedicated place in each classroom. Sometimes if it's not safe for a kid to be in a classroom, we might have them come out into the hallway and be out there, or it depends on the kid and the specific situation and what's going to work best to help them de-escalate. The other day, I had a kid under my desk for a good 20 minutes, and that was helpful for him to sort of be in a more enclosed space. We don't have a dedicated space, but we do everything we can to use the spaces we do have to support what kids need.
Yeah, and I'm just going to chime in and say we have put in a lot of furniture throughout our entire facility in our hallways, specifically to support our remote learners, but it also serves as, just kind of a place where people can take a break. It almost has kind of a cafe feel where everything is more, I don't know, it feels a little less stressful. It's a lot more open. You can kind of hang out there. There's lots of mazes on the ground that our educators and students develop themselves, and it's obstacle courses that they can skip, jump, spin, do all kinds of physical things that's going to help get their wiggles out. We have lots of mats throughout our facility to help support a lot of those large motor skills. It's just, a place to tumble, a place to, do some of the larger physical things. And then we also have a community studio, which serves as a great area to do art, collaborate with others who have visited the community studio, and adding to our community artwork is something that I enjoy and somewhere I spend a lot of my time.
This is Sarah. Mike just went to grab a child's journal, but I wonder if somebody wanted to answer, do you have more or less parent meetings due to COVID?
We actually are meeting the needs of every family, regardless of what that is. We do a lot of virtual meetings with families. So we're hosting parent conferences through Zoom. We have a program that we use for our attendance tracking and billing, all that, that allows for there to be communication, sort of like a text message, but it's through an app. So lots of communication that happens very naturally in that way. And then we do have some in-person stuff that happens, whether that's during pickup or drop-off time. One of our educators will go outside during that pickup window to meet with parents in person during that pickup or drop-off time. And some of our faculty have set up time for social gatherings out we have a park that's next to our building, and so they'll do a social gathering for a small group of parents in that classroom bubbles, and keep that social distancing that needs to happen in that sense. And then earlier on, we actually did drive-up parent meetings where a parent would drive up to our center and our educator would be standing outside talking to them about the progress of their children. So lots of ways of still staying connected to parents, even though there's a lot of parameters for COVID.
And I'm going to stick with you, Darline, right there, because we had a question about the cultural dynamic or diversity of the families you serve at the center. So I was wondering if you can mention that, as well as mention the religious diversity that we have on our staff, as well as the number of languages we speak to support families.
So cultural diversity in our families is actually evolving. We're having a lot more families come to our program who identify as a person of color. We have a couple of families now in our program who are immigrants and refugee, and so we're just welcoming families, whatever their, however they identify, whatever their culture or ethnicity is. Everyone is welcome in our program. We recently have added a 17th language into our language bank here at Hilltop. So what we do is if an educator speaks a second language or their native language is not English, and if they feel comfortable and confident in being able to translate or interpret for a family, we have them in our language bank pool. And so if a family would prefer to be have a parent conference or wants to communicate in their native language, then we would reach out to one of our employees who speaks that language if we have it. We also have reached out to other community partners who can also help us with translating, whether that is American Sign Language or a language that is spoken in our building that one of our educators or faculty members do not speak. And so that's a way that we try to honor our families in that way. But it is important for us not to put things out in print in other languages that we're not able to translate back, because then it would be a one-sided relationship with a parent if we gave them information in their home or native language and then we're unable to reciprocate in that way. And so most of our information is still printed in English, but there are times where we'll sit down with a family member or to fill out paperwork, and we're able to translate that in dialogue, in conversation, not necessarily in print. What was the second part of your question, Mike?
Religious diversity on our staff, I think. I don't know, I forgot.
I think that it's also honoring whether it's our faculty or our families. If someone is needing to be away for a religious purpose, or if they need to step away for prayer or whatever that may be, we would support them in that, and we allow them the opportunity to take that time away from work to do those things.
Thank you. So I was able to grab one of the binders of one of the children. So at the end of the year, they typically look about this thick. But currently, since we are in the beginning, and I'm gonna just hold my hand over her face just because I'm not sure if we have photo permission for her. It starts out about this thick in the beginning. So here we see one of the binders that we have, and in this story, it's actually a story about physics and how she engaged in STEM in the class. So a lot of times you have parents of color, as well as just parents who aren't familiar with our educational philosophy, ask, what are they learning through this play-based approach? And so we have 3 educators in each room. So we have lower numbers ratio-wise than the state, and we're able to extrapolate a lot of the different things that our educators are doing in the classroom, because we have 3 educators and they're able to step out and write these beautiful documentation and really go into depth on how we are using physics, how we are using STEM, how we're using art in the classroom in order to prepare them not just for kindergarten readiness, but for lifelong success. So you'll see in this story that they were doing teeter-totters and catapults, if I can speak properly here, as well as you'll see a lot of the natural materials from our playground that our children were using. And then, as the story progresses, we really do encourage risky play in our center. So we want children to move their bodies, to exercise a range of emotions, to jump, to have their gross motor skills really prevalent and on the forefront. And then you can even see at the end of this particular documentation is, well, how do we extend this work, this moment in time that happened on the playground, how do we extend this back into the classroom so that we can deepen the learning? So you'll see here, it says, to extend this work back into the classroom, we began offering both large and small scale provocations with scales, with cardboard tubes, with blocks, small and large boards, and planks, and objects that could be safely seesawed or catapulted in a busy space with other children. So, that would include lightweight planter cups, plastic people figurines, rectangular counter blocks of various sizes, and the children have eagerly gotten to work with these materials, setting them up in various positions, revealing in how high they can catapult things in the airs, and working independently and collaboratively. So that was just one way that we engage children's learning, and we extend it not just on the playground, but into every single facet of their time here at Hilltop. So I'm looking at the time, and it is 10:33. So I think we have time for maybe one more question, or if not, I can go around, and if everyone from Hilltop can go around and say just one last thought, I would love that. So do we have any last questions, any last thoughts? All right. So I'm going to kick things off with kind of my last thoughts. I encourage everyone to register and sign up and email me at institute@hilltopcc.org, and one of my colleagues can throw that into the chat for me, because we offer a variety of different professional development opportunities that are focused on race, culture, and identity, and how you can how you can bring it into the classroom, into your teaching practices, how it can be in administrative values for you, and how it can do your work with families and partnerships. So we offer a variety of different free materials, as well as some paid, but a lot of free materials, from blogs to videos to coaching, consulting, to the Napcasts, which Darline mentioned. And hey, I'm actually one of the co-hosts, so yay, come check it out. So yeah, I really encourage all you all to reach out and get on our mailing list. Darline, you are muted. One day we'll get it right. You are still muted. There you go.
How about there? Am I good? That's what happens when I multitask, Mike. I was trying to put it in the chat and I got distracted. What am I doing?
Just final
Last minute thoughts?
Final words and thoughts, please.
Yeah. I just want to, I will just say that Hilltop is a magical place with that really honors educators and recognizes the profession of early childhood education, and really centers children at the heart of everything that we do. And we're also evolving, right? We're not, we have room for growth. We have room to just reflect on our work, and I'm excited about where we're going as an organization. I'm also kind of nervous about where we're going as an organization, because I don't want to lose the authenticity of who we are and all the years that we have put into this work, and at the same time, just a huge goal and vision to just creating this utopia where regardless of a child's ability to pay or their needs, that they have a safe place to go and thrive. And I can't wait for that day where we're completely engrossed in just every aspect of child development, and it's going to happen, and I'm excited. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Well, thank you. I'm going to go with Alfonso next. Last thoughts.
Yeah, for me, it's, I joined Hilltop because it was an organization that was doing wonderful things for children and families. And I just want to be able to give those same things to other families and other students across Seattle, and make sure that everybody has access to the wonderful things that Hilltop has to offer. It's going to be challenging. It's been more challenging recently, but it is in that discomfort that we grow. So I'm hoping sooner or later we'll get to a point where we feel we've made a difference.
Thank you. Emily, you are up next, and if you can also ask or answer the question, how much planning time do we offer educators each week? And then if you can also talk about support educator time as well.
Yes. During regular, not COVID times, well, and mostly even now, for the most part, we are able to provide about 3 hours a week for each educator to have planning time. But I believe for most teams, 1 hour of that is a team meeting. And then support educator time is something teachers can request if they are working on a special project or that's going to benefit the organization, or if they are supporting work with the Institute. just so that we are providing as much work-life balance as possible. Our, educator work is intense and very rigorous, and so we are doing everything we can. And we've built this up over many, many years, systems to support educators in all the hard work that they're doing. I also wanted to say, when COVID is over, come tour our site or our sites. Right now we have 2. Maybe later we'll have 5, or maybe we'll have 1, or maybe we'll have 0, but hopefully not. But I know that a video tour isn't giving anything any justice, really, but coming and seeing what's actually happening in our spaces, I think it's a great experience for a lot of people. So come back in real life.
Thank you. And Sarah, for last thoughts.
Yeah, nothing to add to those great thoughts other than to notice that what I heard people calling out is that we hold such a high image of children, such a high image of families, and such a high image of ourselves as faculty. And that's sort of at the heart of moving this work forward.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. Make sure you fill out the feedback form because there are daily prizes to be won, and we look forward to seeing you on our email list, as well as hopefully seeing you virtually or in person one day. So thank you. Take care of yourself, wash your hands, and we'll see each other soon.